Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this episode we're going to work on the SC300 a little bit more and start putting the hot side back together. So I have my MLS gaskets that came in and the header is all cleaned up. I got the head flange done as best as I could and it's all soaked with penetrating oil, so that way we will hopefully prevent a little bit more or any excess rust from forming on it again. So what we're going to do with this car today is I got to looking around in some of my extra materials boxes and I found this stuff, which this is Inconel tubing, and I can't really use it on any other projects, and I'm not super stoked with the downpipe on the Lexus. So if we put two and two together, why don't we build an Inconel downpipe for the SC300? Now, obviously, it's way fancier and way more than this car needs, and as you can see with my beautiful headlights and paint and all of that, there's obviously a multitude of other things this car needs other than an Inconel downpipe, but I don't care. I'm going to build it anyways, and I think it should look pretty cool, and it will be a very unique part for this car. So we're going to be stepping up from a 3-inch to a 3.5-inch downpipe. And we will have to make a concentric cone to go from the 3-inch V-band to 3.5 to make all of this work the way that it needs to. But before we do any of that, I need to put the header and the turbo back in place so that way we have the points that we're building from. So let me throw you guys on a tripod and we can start putting this back together and then start moving forward with this Inconel downpipe. Well, unfortunately, as I was tightening one of these bolts down, and this car I always ran bolts as opposed to studs to hold the header on. It's this guy right here. It is forever loose. So there evidently are no more threads left in that hole. So I'll have to get either a time cert or a helicoil kit, and I'll just end up doing all eight of the mounting holes rather, to never have this issue again with this head. And this is the original head and block that came in this car. So the car is a 92. That means it's going on 29, or if it is, it very well may be 29 years old that all of this stuff is. And it's lived a good life, and we'll give it the benefit of the doubt that maybe it was just a little bit tired and didn't want the thread in that one more time. But that won't hold us up from anything else that we're doing. I can go ahead and I'll tighten down the rearmost and the foremost fasteners just to get the header in its home, and I can deal with that stripped hole later. So let me go ahead and I'll get those two bolts tightened. Then we can get the turbo placed back in its home. We can put the wastegates back in their positions and can start figuring out what we need to do to build the downpipe for this thing. And we now have the turbo back in its home. So I was able to locate the turbo based off of the position of the intercooler tube, which you can see down through this hole in the body here. So one quick note, whenever you are building anything with, or anything around a V-band turbine inlet turbo, always make sure that you clamp down that V-band inlet clamp before you start fabricating anything, as if you do not do that as you're working on the part that you're building and the turbo rotates, then you just lost your index point and you may not be building the way that you think you are. So this is all tight. That's all good to go. Compressor cover is tight. The wastegates are still loose-ish, as they may have to move around a little bit, and they really don't need to be locked into any particular space at this point in time. So now that we have this all back together, aside from that stupid stripped bolt hole, we can go ahead and start figuring out how we need to attack this downpipe. Now, the first 2 orders of business that we need to attend to before we can really start stringing those pieces of tube right there, I need to scavenge this flange off of the old downpipe, and I also need to make a concentric cone going from 3 to 3.5 inch. So I have somewhere around here to find where I put it. Here it is. I have this piece, which, other than a toothless metal smile, what this is a 3 to 4 inch concentric cone that I had made as part of a demonstration in one of the first videos that I made for this channel. So even though it is 3 to 4 inch, we can still alter this just a little bit to make it a 3 to 3.5 inch. So what we'll need to do is I can mark out the perimeter of this as is, and then I will need to subtract the circumference of 3.5 inch from the circumference of 4 inch rather, as this dimension along here from corner to corner matches up to the circumference of 4 inch. So once I have that difference, I can divide it by 2. And the reason that we're going to divide it by 2 is it changes this angle right here in each one of these corners just a little bit. So we need to account for that difference on both sides, so that way the geometry is correct the whole way through our little arch right there. Once we have that done, I can cut that piece out. We can go over to the slip roll that's hiding over behind the MIG welder over there. We can roll this cone, I can tack it, and we can, I guess, tack it to the flange at that point and start building this downpipe. So let me go ahead, get this piece flattened out just a little bit more, then we can mark it out, do the math we need to do, cut it out, and move forward with this over-the-top downpipe for the SC. All right, as you saw, I traced out that template onto our Inconel sheet here. I did the math, and evidently we have to cut out these triangles on either side. Now, in looking at it, I'm not 100% sold that that's going to work. I'm just having a little bit of difficulty wrapping my mind around it. Because normally when I make these cones, the line for the smaller side sits inside the line for the larger side. And it may just be me being stupid, but what we're going to do is to cut out this whole shape that will make the 3 to 4 inch cone, and I can always cut a little bit of that 3 to 4 inch cone off, as opposed to doing it as the math says, and I'm sure the math is right, but I only have this sheet of Inconel, and I really don't feel like ordering another one in. So we'll do what is the easy guess and check method, as opposed to relying on math. And I'll go ahead, cut this piece out, we can start rolling it, and then we can trim it down to 3.5 inch. The concentric cone is made, it is tacked to the turbine outlet flange, and that assembly is now installed into the Lexus. So here's where we are sitting currently. Don't mind the dirty clamp, I did not clean that. It's kind of a little bit humorous to have the dirtiest V-band that I've ever seen with some of the most expensive material, but I digress. So the point of contention that we have to deal with here is that primary right there, as I can't exactly come straight out of that concentric cone, otherwise the downpipe tube will run directly into that primary. So I'll have to get a little bit crafty, maybe do a little bit of a miter grind on the piece coming out of there, use a little bit of an angle, something along those lines to make the downpipe snake up a little bit to go around that piece of tubing that is the primary tube. So I have my two bend sections here, and I was playing around a little bit with them, just trying to get a rough idea of what needs to happen. And don't mind this one being all colorful. Had taken it, polished it, and burnt it with the torch just to see what kind of color change I can expect out of Inco, thinking preemptively for the header on the Supra. But I'm going to play around with these bends a little bit more and see if I can figure out what needs to happen, or what bend needs to be there, how we need to snake around that primary tube. And my goal for today is to get the first section after this concentric cone tacked onto the concentric cone. So that way I can come in tomorrow and start building down as far as I can get. And I am limited with the materials that I have. I have this section of straight, this little end of a mandrel bend, and the reason that it is at an angle there is Inco is such an expensive material that when the company that manufactures it makes it, they make just enough for the bend to happen. And when you mandrel bend a piece of tubing, it stretches and it distorts it, and that is just the end of what that looks like. So I need to go ahead, figure out what needs to happen right off of there, and hopefully in a few minutes we can get a piece tacked onto there, and we will be ready to come in tomorrow and finish up the rest of it. And we now have a fabricated Inconel downpipe on the Lexus. So I don't know how well you guys will be able to see, but I had to make a pie cut for it, which not the most ideal way to do this, but obviously with the amount of material that I have, I'm very limited in what I'm able to do. And I used everything but that straight section you see over on the large sander, and this little stub section here. So this was everything that I had to get it to this point, and just kind of had to work with play the hand we were dealt. So we have our concentric cone, we have a little angle there that it actually angles up slightly to clear that primary with the logo on it. We have our bend going down that has a miter angle ground into it. Have a pie cut section, and we have the straight section beneath that. All of those pieces from this bend on down, they all have miter grinds in them. So we're dealing with complex angles, and I know I didn't film a whole lot of that process, but take my word for it, it was a bit arduous to get to this point. But we are here now, and the only thing left to do at this point is to weld the downpipe and make it one piece. However, it's late enough here right now where I'm going to get out of here for the day. And I'll come in tomorrow, can zap all that together and figure out the location for the O2 bung, place that, and then the downpipe will be completed aside from the outlet V-band flange, which I don't believe I have any. I have to check my V-band box and see if I have an extra flange. If not, I'll have to order an assembly and weld that on at a later date. But I will catch up with you guys tomorrow. We will get this downpipe welded up, and that will be one step forward in the backwards progression that we've made so far. So I'll catch you guys then. We'll weld this up and keep rocking with this project. And we are back to finish up the Inconel downpipe for the Lexus. I realized yesterday I didn't go into very much detail about this piece and didn't do a great job filming. Kind of got in the zone as I was building this piece, and the camera work and filming came secondary, unfortunately. But we have the piece on the bench right in front of me here, so let's go through it a little bit. So what we are working with here, this is a 3-inch to 3.5-inch Inconel 625 downpipe that is going on my Lexus over there. And the reason that it's built in the manner that it is, meaning that there's a pie cut section here, and it's as short as it is, Inconel is a very expensive and hard to come by material, and this material, these two bends here are left over from building the header on the Supra. This transitional cone that I rolled was from a sheet that I had purchased to make a trim ring when I was running a fender exit exhaust on the Supra. And the pie cut section and the straight section here are pieces left over from a drop that I had purchased off of eBay, meaning that it was a piece that an industrial supplier had in excess and they were getting rid of. Got it for a good deal just to have a little bit around to play around with prior to investing all of the money and time into building the Supra's header. So as you can tell, it's a hodgepodge of different materials. Oh, and the other piece that I forgot is the flange that was on the old stainless downpipe. I cleaned it up, reconditioned it as best I could. It will work fine for this application. So it's obviously a hodgepodge of different materials from different suppliers and what have you, but it should work out perfectly fine for this application. And didn't show very much of it, but I've talked about it, I believe, in the past when I've mentioned working with Inconel. All of the cuts on these joints here and these pieces of tubing are all done with an angle grinder. And the reason for that, Inconel is a very hard material. And my old bandsaw behind me here, it barely even scratches the surface when you're trying to cut this material with it. So all of the cuts that I make on this material, I make with my handy angle grinder over there. Then I true it up on either one of my belt sanders and go from there. So these Inconel parts truly are a custom hand fit piece for every single one of them. And I mean, that was the same method that I used to build the header on the Supra. And just to give you an idea, for anybody that's worked with an angle grinder before, I mean, every single one of those weld joints, that is a cut that was made with the angle grinder, trued up on the belt sander, so on and so forth. So there is a ton of work involved with building Inco parts, not to mention, obviously, the cost associated just with getting the material in the first place. And if you don't believe me, try to find Inconel bends, try to source that material to build anything with. It isn't easy. But all that aside, I think we are now ready to weld this piece together. So I'm going to weld all of the seams that you see here. I may end up putting an additional straight section on the bottom of, around the outlet of the downpipe, as it runs fairly short as it is right now. I believe that the downpipe ends somewhere right about here. So depending on when I get my V-band flange assembly in, If I like its location, then I'll leave it as is. If not, then I still have this section of straight minus that cut right there, but I guess I could cut along that cut and gain myself another 3.5, 4 inches onto the length of this downpipe. But all that is ancillary to what we are going to do right now. So let me go ahead. I will put this downpipe on one of my purge blocks, get everything set up, get some gas flowing through it, and then we can strike an arc and start melting this together. There we have the welded Inconel downpipe for the Lexus. So definitely not the nicest Inconel welds that I've ever done, but they will certainly hold for this application. It isn't like it's pre-turbine where it's getting absolutely pounded with heat, but being post-turbine, the turbo scrubs quite a bit of that heat off, and this will never cause me an issue. So looking all the way around, nice welds throughout, and let's see if I can show the inside. You might be able to see the penetration on the welds there. Everything's full pen and no issues with structure or longevity with this thing. So the last two things we need to do with this downpipe right now are to place the O2 bung and to put a BPA logo tag on it. As something this special, I 100% am going to tag it. So I will take this, put it back in the engine bay of the Lexus, get it positioned in its rightful home, and from there I can take one of the O2 bungs, figure out the location for it, mark that location out, and then attempt to punch the hole through the Inconel tubing for it. I'm going to try to use a hole saw. I'm not sure how well that's going to work, but we'll give it a shot and see. Worst case, I'll figure out another method to do it. So I'll quit blabbering on. Let's go do this and get this project wrapped up. After that last little bit of work, we now have a completed, at least to this point, Inconel downpipe for the SC. And it came out awesome. So, have my logo tag on it. Nice location, nice and visible. The O2 bung is in a good location, both for routing of the wires and distance from the turbine outlet. And I'm not sure if you can see or not where that downpipe ends at, but like I said before, I very well may put an additional straight section on the end of it, but I wanted to end it here right now, so that way I have the option to, if I need to put additional length onto the downpipe, I can. If not, I can put the V-band directly in, or directly on the current outlet of it, and all will be well. But I am stoked with how that came out, especially working with a very finite amount of material and doing it not in the most desirable way that I could come up with, or that I could think of rather, it still came out awesome. And now this car has a downpipe that is a one of one. I probably, unless I can find a customer as crazy as I am to have a part like this built, this will be a one of one, and very, very happy with it. So obviously there's still a bit to do with this car, and I didn't particularly need to build a new downpipe for it, but I wanted to, had the material, and rather than have it sit and live the rest of its life in a cardboard box, now those pieces of Inco tubing will be used and will live a hopefully long and prosperous life as the downpipe for the Lexus here. And you guys may have seen when I was punching the hole for the O2 bung that the initial drill bit went through, and then I think that was a time-lapse portion of the video. The hole saw, no-go. Other larger size drill bits, also a no-go. But this step bit right here was the key to our success. So I was able to drill, I think it was a 1/4 inch pilot hole into the piece of tubing, run the step bit the whole way through, and then the last little bit of additional diameter that I needed, I was able to account for with my carbide burr. So all is well there. We have the downpipe, we have all of the bungs and the logo and everything else done for it, aside from the V-band outlet, like I've said probably 5 times by now. Department of Redundancy department. But I digress, and I think that is probably going to wrap up this video. So, as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next one.